but it's going to be at the City Park Pavilion on August 27th at 12:30. And please stop by and meet Mariah Phillips. She's running for U.S. Congress 4th District. And hopefully we'll be having one for you here, too. And
yes,
we'll announce that, too.
Yeah.
We are neutral in primaries, but we will announce events, obviously. And then our next meeting is going to be September 16th at 9 o'clock, and we're going to be at the Franklin County Annex, and we hope to have all of you come out. So, and I wanted to introduce our guest today, and he is running against Mariah Phillips in the Democratic primary, and then whoever wins that one will then run against Scott Desjardins to represent us in the 4th District in Washington. So we have with us today Stephen Reynolds, and welcome.
Good morning, Helen. Thank you for having me.
And he made it just in time for the show.
Just in time, yeah.
Stuck in traffic. So, first question, did you get to see the eclipse?
Yes, I did. I actually went up to Warren County.
Okay.
They had an incredible event up there on the city square, and of course they had totality there. It was within the range, and the best part was they had a Pink Floyd cover band that played the entire Dark Side of the Moon album while the eclipse was going on, and it was really surreal and a very incredible experience.
I understand they actually played the Dark Side of the Moon while it was, while the eclipse was going on.
Wow.
Is what I understand.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. It was a very, very unique atmosphere and a huge turnout. I mean, the traffic was unbelievable.
Yeah, I talked to some people that were there last night that went up for that, and they were talking about how incredible, how much fun it was, and everything.
Was this, where in Warren County was this?
It was in McMinnville, right on the square, yeah.
Oh, okay. We were really near there. We went up to Rock Island State Park, which is really close. And yeah, it was, I thought, in Swanee it would be 99.4. That's pretty good, but it was like, no pun intended, night and day. It was so, because I saw pictures that people had taken, just outside of the totality zone, and it was, it really didn't get that dark. But where we were, it just got so dark, and it got so cold all of a sudden. Not cold, but, a lot cooler.
Oh, yeah, you could definitely tell the difference in the temperature.
It was amazing. So it was a cover band playing,
or
they played the actual record?
It was a cover band, and they even had the sound effects in between each song, and it was very, very unique experience. So I wasn't expecting that, and but the turnout was tremendous. Good.
Yeah, there was a lot of people at Rock Island State Park too. Speaking of Dark Side of the Moon, when I was in high school, a good friend of mine, back then we listened to records, you know. So you'd put your record on and it would play through, and her record, the way it worked is as soon as it ended, it would just start over again from the beginning. It was set up that way. So every night, this is what she did every single night. Before she went to bed, she would put on Dark Side of the Moon, and it would play all night long while she was sleeping, over and over and over. So whenever I would sleep at her house in her room, that's what you heard all night long. And it would give me nightmares, It's kind of a weird record. It's not something you want to hear all night long while you're sleeping over and over and over.
Right. But during an eclipse, it was very...
that's an appropriate
very
time
cool.
for it.
Yeah.
But anyway, can you tell us a little bit about your biography?
Sure.
Like, where were you born?
Sure,
what
Helen.
was your family do? Whatever.
Yeah, I was born just up the road in Coffee County. Born and raised in the Manchester area. Actually grew up on a farm in Summitville, Tennessee. And then in 1988, I moved down to Rutherford County, where I've lived for the last 30 years. And so I'm a native-born Tennessean. I think that's very important in a congressional race. The connectivity to the district is one of the most important attributes that a candidate can have. And so I know it's hard to believe, but I'm right now the only candidate born and raised in the state of Tennessee that's in this race.
That's true. Yeah, Mariah Phillips is from California.
Yeah, that's right, from California. We had Grant Sterrett from California last time.
Yeah, and then Desjardins from South Dakota.
South Dakota, right. And so these folks, and so we're glad that people love Tennessee and want to move here. But I think that it's important to a lot of people, especially in the rural parts of Tennessee. I think that means a lot that I've lived here my entire life, and that I understand a lot of the issues that are going on out there. And the real big thing is to understand the cultural difference. There's a big difference between Murfreesboro and Cleveland, Tennessee, for example. And so trying to develop messages that are broad enough to cover the cultural difference of the 4th Congressional District is really a tough deal to do. Obviously, it's been gerrymandered. We have 2 entire counties that have been sliced in half, with Bradley County and Murray County, and so that's another challenge that we face out there. What side, depending on what side of the road you live on, may determine what congressional district you are in 2 of the counties, and so those are unique challenges, I think, that other folks don't really face in congressional races. Right.
And when you say you live in Rutherford County, are you in Murfreesboro?
I'm in Murfreesboro. Lived there for 30 years. Raised.
So you remember when it was a little bitty town, huh?
I do. I moved there in 1988 and went to school there, and actually started my career there in the infrastructure in the construction business, and that's carried me all over the world, 46 states and 9 countries in the last 30 years.
Okay. What particularly, what kind of infrastructure?
Material supply is what I started in, but we've done, I've done everything from roads and bridges to locks and dams to power plants to obviously commercial businesses and everything in between. And so I'm an infrastructure champion, and I make no bones about that. I was just coming down the Calvin Highway this morning. It needs to be widened, if you ask me. There's a lot of traffic out here, and they could use some work here in Franklin County, I know, and certainly all over the 4th Congressional District. Where I live in Rutherford County, we are facing tremendous pressure, especially with 100,000 people moving in the next decade. It's already really, it was faster to get to Winchester than it would have been to get across Murfreesboro this morning.
I can imagine.
So there's a lot of work out there that needs to be done, and these are basic, what I call this time of year, Helen, blocking and tackling. It's football time, and very fundamental things that I believe the government should be focused on, infrastructure, schools, and healthcare and hospital, quality of life, and I think that we get distracted by a lot of other issues, and we should stay focused on the fundamentals.
Well, that's what this show is about. It's called Common Sense Matters. We don't talk about flag burning or right or Confederate monuments, things that really don't affect your everyday life. We try to talk about things that affect your everyday life. Healthcare, taxes, the road you drive on, just things kind of running smoothly, or, college affordability, things that affect everyday people, not sort of big symbolic or ideological things. Those really don't make that much difference in your daily life.
I agree with that, Helen, and there are a lot of wedge issues that are out there right now. It's something that we have to overcome, is that these issues that really a congressional representative would have zero impact on, but still people will not vote for you just based on they'll ask you what your belief is, and they won't vote for you, even though you would have zero impact on that issue, no matter what you believed.
Exactly. I mean, like an issue like transgenders in the military. I mean, that's got to be 0.0001% of the American population, and yet it's so played up in the media. These kind of divisive wedge issues. I don't even care to think about them because they really don't affect my life at all.
Right. And the Ned Ray McWhorter was one of the best that I ever saw at staying focused on the fundamentals. And, I try to model myself after Ned Ray, after Bart Gordon, those types of folks that stayed focused on the fundamental parts and what we can do for the citizens here in the 4th Congressional District. That's really what this is all about. We all pay federal taxes. What are we getting in return?
Yeah, and so one of my questions I was going to ask you is, are you seeing a mismatch between what the media focuses on and what matters in people's lives?
Absolutely.
That was one of my questions I wrote down. Here we are already talking about that. But when you go on listening tours, what are the main issues that people are asking you about, that really matter to them?
So really healthcare and jobs, and even though that we're showing, they're saying unemployment's at very near record low right now, that's not true in the 4th Congressional District. We're still around 10% here, a little over 10% actually, and so, and it's not just jobs, it's good paying jobs, Helen, that are important. People have to make a living out there, and we have a lot of opportunities, but we're starting to see some increase in wages out there. But folks have to, we've had a devaluing of the currency since we bailed the banks out in 2007. through the TARP Act. And so as a result, a pound of bacon is $8.50 now. Well, everyone's still getting paid the same.
Right.
Wages have not gone up, and relatively speaking, in the last 40 years. But obviously, inflation has driven up the prices of everything. And so we hear a lot about a living wage, and of course, health care. Even with my conservative friends that I talk to and the people that are identify as Republicans, very concerned about health care in the future of this country, how we're going to handle that.
Now, do you support raising the minimum wage?
I think that we should. I really do. I think it's been a long time coming. My son is a sophomore at the University of Tennessee, and he started working. He worked all summer at Amazon to help, pay for his college, and they started him off at $13. Now here's a 19-year-old kid starting off at $13. So I think that a lot of industries and commerce have realized that in order to attract, they're going to have to pay more. And so I don't think that raising the minimum wage, quite frankly, is going to have that major of an impact, because a lot of these companies are already paying above the minimum wage. But I think that we should. I think we owe the American citizen a payback for, once again, this devaluing of the currency. This was not our choice that happened in 2007. I'm a firm believer in sound money, and we have not compensated for this inflation that has taken place, especially in the last 10 years.
I also wanted to say, if anybody wants to call in, if anyone has questions for Stephen Reynolds, he's a candidate for U.S. Congress, please call in. And can you remind me the number, Al?
967-2201.
Yeah, call 967-2201 if you have any questions about anything for our guest today, Stephen Reynolds. Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people who are working full-time and they have no benefits at all, or not even more than full-time. They have 2 or 3 jobs, and yet none of these offer health care.
Right.
So I'm curious, do you support Medicaid expansion in Tennessee?
Absolutely, 100%. We've passed up $3 billion, and we've had 9 hospitals close. We have other hospitals on the verge of closing in the 4th District. If these Medicaid and Medicare cuts go through that are proposed right now, your hospital right here in Winchester could be jeopardized. And I didn't realize this. Recently I became aware, of course they kept this very secret, but Erlanger down in Chattanooga received a $30 million federal cash infusion. Otherwise, they were going to close the doors at Erlanger in Chattanooga. And so we have got to, I certainly support the expansion of the Medicaid dollars, absolutely.
Do you believe in single payer?
I do. I think we should move incrementally. I've evolved on that position. To me, at the end of the day, the ACA was a Republican plan from Massachusetts. It was Mitt Romney's plan. But at the end of the day, and there are things that we need to do to repair that and amend that, but at the end of the day, it's just another insurance scheme, if you ask me. And so people's main problem with the ACA is the mandate. And so I'll ask folks that say that to me, I'll say, okay, I understand you have a problem with the mandate. Would you sign a waiver waiving, any right that you would have, say you're in an accident or you get sick, that if, unless you can pay cash for the services, the rest of us shouldn't have to pay for that. And that's essentially what it boils down to. And when you start talking like that to folks, suddenly they say, well, I'm not going to surrender my right to my right, or my, if I get sick, to go to the hospital. And so, folks, especially young people that really don't like the mandate. And I can understand, because when you're young, you think you're never going to get sick, you're never going to be in an accident. But the truth is all those people that can't afford insurance, it all falls on the rest of us that can. And so I think we have to find the most economical way to cover everyone. And I believe a basic service like Medicare for All would be the way to go. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we eliminate private insurance, but I think that there's a way that we could do that, but it would have to be incremental, because otherwise it's going to be very disruptive to the markets out there.
Yeah, I was saying we had a show on single payer, and I was saying, in my family in a typical year, and we're all healthy. We're a family of 5. I generally spend typically $14,000 to $15,000 a year when you count in all my insurance premiums that my employer and I put in, all of our doctor visits, all our medicines, all our dentist visits, all that. It's about $15,000 a year.
Right.
And I would much rather not pay that and pay like maybe even $2,000 more in taxes. What that guy said was it would amount to me having to pay $500 to $600 more in taxes to get universal health care. I was like, well, compare that to the $15,000 I'm paying, I would gladly do that.
And I think when you look at the math like that, Helen, most people will agree the other impact that would have would be on major businesses that do cover their employees, because I've worked for a large corporation now, and we have a massive human resources department that just handles the benefits of all of our employees, and so the benefit to business to get out of covering their employees would be tremendous, and I think that would help our business community grow, quite frankly.
And people would have so much more flexibility. They could move around from job to job more, or work for themselves more, or anything if you weren't tied. And I think it must just be a horrible burden on businesses having to provide health insurance for their employees.
That's right, and even with the ACA, a lot of people don't realize how much all of the private businesses had to convert over their software and how they manage their human resources. All of that took place when the ACA was implemented, and there were hundreds of millions of dollars spent, probably billions of dollars all over this country preparing for that. And so there's a lot of folks in business that don't want to go back, quite frankly. So
don't want to go back to
that don't want to repeal the ACA.
Right.
Think that it's going to cost even more money to their businesses, and so it's. Once again, back to the media and what the media puts out there. When you really start dialing in the numbers and looking at it, you're right. If I could pay $500 more and have universal care, we have people that stay in jobs just for insurance coverage benefits, and we have seniors in many cases who could be retired that are working to supplement, say, their current Medicare, Medicaid, and of course that takes up jobs for young people that might be coming into the workforce. There are all of these ripple effects that are out there.
Okay. Well, and you say you work in the infrastructure business.
Yes.
Well, there was one area in which I did agree with President Trump, and that how we really need to modernize our infrastructure. Because I've traveled in other countries in Europe, and their infrastructure just blows ours away.
Yes, it does.
And so I really agree with him on that. But then, of course, when the details came out, it sounds like he wants it to be sort of more privatized.
Sure.
So how does that? What are your? Do you think infrastructure should be publicly funded or privately funded, or a mixture? Or if it is privately funded, does that mean we're going to have to pay tolls every 5 miles? I mean, what does that mean?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I was actually in D.C. in May and meeting with some folks in the industry, and they were very concerned that the actual cuts to the Department of Transportation were basically what the president's plan was to implement into infrastructure. So it was really revenue neutral, what's being proposed right now. But as far as P3 goes, I think we
I'm sorry, what does P3 mean?
I'm sorry, P3 is public-private partnership.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what they're talking about is P3 programs. And so no one likes toll roads, Helen. And
I just drove to Maine this summer, and every 10 miles all the traffic on the interstate had to stop and pay the toll.
Yeah.
And then one time, I think we accidentally went through one without realizing it, and so then 2 weeks later, I got a bill from the state of Massachusetts for $1.50. I had to mail a $1.50 check, I guess because they read your license plate.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It just seems like such a nuisance.
They do, and then when you really dig into this, in a lot of cases...
So in a public-private partnership, that means toll roads.
It typically means toll roads. What happens is a company will come in and finance and build a road, and then they're allowed to, let's take, for example, right now, I-4 in Orlando is the most recent P3 project that's in the southeast, and it's a $2 billion project. And so what happened was the company, the winning contractor, had to finance the first $1 billion. And then the state of Florida and the federal government picked up the second $1 billion. But it gave the company that's contracting this the rights to tolls right through the middle of downtown Orlando for the next 50 years. Now, here's the problem I see with that. This company isn't even from the United States. They're from Spain. And so we have an offshore company that's going to be collecting tolls from all of our drivers for the next 50 years. So I'm not a big believer in toll roads or in P3 from roads and bridge standpoint. But when you look at something like a high-speed rail, that's something where I could say, okay, this may be a project where we have to look at P3. If we wanted, a lot of talk in Rutherford County and Davidson County about building a light rail from Murfreesboro into the Davidson County line or into Nashville. You're looking at $88 million a mile there. And so you're talking, once again, about a $2 billion project. And so something like that where folks would pay $2 or $3 to ride a light rail every day, I think that's much more palatable than a toll road.
You expect to pay for a train ride, but you don't expect to pay to drive on a road.
That's exactly right. And so I think it's a mixture is really the answer.
And so this company from Spain that's collecting tolls for 50 years, does that they're going to make way more than $1 billion.
Oh, well, they've run the numbers on that. Right. They've financed $1 billion. They're probably going to get $30 billion back over the next 50 years.
So if it had just been paid for by our government, then all that money would be staying in the U.S.
That's exactly
right. So we're sending basically $29 billion to Spain.
That's approximately, yes. It depends on how many people drive
on
the road.
Or going from the public into the private.
That's exactly right. And so now in the future, every family that takes every parents that take their family to Disney World and flies into the Orlando airport, if they rent a car, they're going to pay that toll on the way to Disney World. And so, that's how this deal was set up. But it was such a massive project that they would have had to pull all of the funding from every other project in the state of Florida just to do this one. And so you do have to find unique ways to finance these larger projects. But like I said, I don't, and extreme cases maybe toll roads, but I really don't favor that unless it's a project like a light rail, something like that.
And so you think that's generally the route that Trump wants to go?
I think he wants to go the route for roads and bridges and everything with the public-private partnership. Yeah.
Well, that doesn't sound like much fun.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And then I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, let's talk about your opponent, Scott Desjardins.
Sure.
What have you noticed in his voting record?
Well,
what has his voting record been?
We were just talking about roads. He's voted against the highway bill 6 times. Since 2010.
Like voting against funding it?
Yes, against the surface transportation bill that comes up. And so we don't have a sustainable highway infrastructure fund right now. It's been completely depleted through, kind of like Social Security. It's been raided by the Congress for other projects. And this was started by Eisenhower, a Republican, back in the 50s. And I can remember in 1993, the first time I went to D.C. as a grassroots lobbyist, I met with Fred Thompson, a Republican icon. And Fred Thompson, Senator Thompson, was a fine man, and he welcomed me in his office. And he said, "Steve, I know why you're here. Roads and bridges are important, and I'm going to vote to increase the gas tax so that we can have the funding that we need." And that was way back in 1993, Helen. And so here we are in 2017. The Governor Haslam just got the Improve Act passed. It's going to help the state of Tennessee tremendously.
So you supported that?
I definitely supported that, and that was bipartisan support. Once they put in the transit initiatives for the larger cities, the Democrats got behind that bill as well.
What were the transit initiatives?
Well, they're looking at some light rail in Nashville.
Oh, that would be so great.
Yeah, and they're also looking at, for the metro areas, they will be able to bring a referendum for taxes to improve mass transit in the areas surrounding Davidson County, including Davidson County.
Because, the traffic is out of control in Nashville.
It's unbelievable. I had a visitor in from one of our vice presidents came into town last week from Tampa. And it was the Code Red traffic day. And he was when I punched in my GPS, I had to pick him up at the hotel. He was 31 miles away. The estimated time of arrival was 3 hours and 45 minutes later. So we're turning into Atlanta is what's happening. And it actually, because we don't have the capacity of Atlanta as far as their infrastructure goes, I believe it's worse than Atlanta right now. So
Atlanta has
ways.
like 8 lanes wide.
Right.
Yeah. And why do you think he opposes funding the highway bill?
Well, Scott has not stood for any sort of tax increase or for any sort of sustainable funding for infrastructure at all. And I think that he would probably tell you that he favors the private partner, very similar to what...
so he'd rather us be using toll roads?
I would say so, yes. I would say that would be his... really, honestly, Helen, I really haven't heard a solution from him in 7 years on that issue, quite frankly. And I think the people of Tennessee deserve that, and I think especially... if we're going to continue to attract top industry and top jobs, and that's part of the 3 pillars of job creation: infrastructure, an educated workforce, and a good quality of life. Apple's not going to come to Winchester if they can't plug in or if you don't have a hospital. And so these very basic things of how we create the environment to lift people up through jobs, through good wages, infrastructure is a pillar of that.
All right. If any of you out there have a question for Mr. Reynolds, please give us a call, 967-2201. Al, I finally remembered the number. You'll be proud of me. Okay. Can you tell us anything else about Scott Desjardins' voting record?
Well, of course, he voted for the repeal of the ACA. And of course, and that's pretty popular here in the 4th Congressional District, although I think that sentiment has changed. Like I said, the more Republican, conservative folks that I run into, that's still their top concern is health care. And so that's one of the biggies is the ACA. Other than that, there's been very little legislative accomplishments that I can point to in 7 years. Really, actually, the Congress in general has really done very little. Last year, when I ran in 2016, the United States, we had tested our 5th graders more days in school than the Congress was actually in session.
Good Lord. Wow.
And so these guys aren't doing anything. Now, whether you say that's by design or whether we're so split in our country, but that's what we need. We have to have people that are willing to work together. And at some point, I believe that moderate Republicans and right-leaning independents are going to decide that this 30% of right-wing Tea Party contingent that's been controlling the rest of the country, at some point, they're going to realize that they're going to have to team up with the Democrats to get things done in this country and to overcome the obstructionist of the 30%. And I would really put Scott in that category because once again, it's very easy to say no to everything, Helen. It takes courage to say yes sometimes too. So.
And I'm curious, what are your views about money in politics?
So I'm very much against that. We will not accept a dime from the pharmaceutical industry, my campaign. We will not accept money from insurance. By the way, in Washington, for every congressman, there are 300 insurance lobbyists in D.C.
For every one
For every single
there
congressman,
are 300.
yeah, that's right.
Wow.
And so we won't accept money from the defense industry or from the banking industry. So my campaign has been built from the ground up. We're not a top-down campaign. We're not some glossy TV commercial, send out some mailers, make a pretty commercial. We've been going around for 16 months, talking to people, talking to individuals, and building a grassroots movement out there. And that's really what our campaign is about. So if you are against money in politics, I'm your candidate. I was the last guy to get in the race in 2016 once I found out Desjardins did not have an opponent, and which is, there's 100,000 people out there that do not want to vote for Scott Desjardins. They deserve a voice. And so I decided to get in the race, and in 7 short months, on about $70,000, we acquired more votes than any challenging Democrat in the state of Tennessee, and we acquired 18,000 more votes than Hillary Clinton did. And so money is important to help you get the word out, but at some point, when do you sell out to the special interests, you're calling and begging strangers for money. I ran the cleanest campaign against Dr. Desjardins anyone has. I didn't talk about any of the ugly things that all of the other candidates have. Citizens want to talk about the issues, and so I'm not going to beg strangers for money so that then I can then put a disturbing message in their living room on their television. That's what's wrong with politics. And it sounds a little idealistic, I'm sure, but we have to lead by example. And so that's what I'm really trying to do. So we most of our money comes from in the district.
Now I've heard that a sitting congressman or woman has to raise about $40,000 a day just to stay alive.
That's crazy, right?
That is. I mean, how can you be beholden to your people, to your constituents, when you're beholden to these people who are giving you $40,000 a day? That's who your master is. That's who you're serving. And so, I think we have got to get money out of politics. So I really believe we've got to overturn Citizens United.
I'm very much favor overturning that, yes. And
so do you want to tell our guests what Citizens United is?
Well, Citizens United was a Supreme Court ruling back about 2010 about really it's a free speech issue and a First Amendment issue, and do people have the right to give unlimited amounts of cash to their
corporations or people.
Corporations or people, that was part of it as well.
And they could give unlimited amounts to candidates.
That's right, and so now we refer to that as dark money. So when Scott and I were when we came out of the primary last year, I had about $70,000. He had about $150,000. There wasn't that big of a disparity between our campaign totals. But however, I know that Congressman Desjardins had a lot of dark money back there had he needed it. He could have called on the Koch brothers to dump $5 million worth of television ads that was said, Stephen Reynolds loves Nancy Pelosi, and Stephen Reynolds is going to raise your taxes. I mean, it's the same old line they use year after year. Unfortunately, they've weaponized Leader Pelosi's name. I'm sure she's a fine lady, but they've weaponized her name down here. They did it to John Ossoff, and so I suspect they'll continue to ride that horse until something changes.
Guys, we got a phone call. I want to know your standing on the Second Amendment and the right to carry.
So I'm very much pro Second Amendment. I grew up here in Tennessee. As a matter of fact, bird season's about to open up here in a couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to that. I'll be on a couple of hunts around the District of Tennessee, but I'm very much pro Second Amendment. I'm for common sense. I think universal background checks are common sense. I believe that we should certainly check out the folks that are purchasing firearms, but I would never support taking away a family's ability to defend themselves in their own home. And once again, I'm a sportsman, and so I'm pro Second Amendment, and I have in no way, shape, or form would I ever support confiscation of guns or taking your guns. So that's another misnomer that's out there that we're told.
Absolutely, not going to happen.
Absolutely.
I mean, how could it even happen? Even if someone wanted to, how could you go into every home in the United States? It's literally. It's logistically impossible.
Right. Well, once again, it's one of these wedge issues where something is created that's not possible, and so everyone chases the shiny object and actually believes that, or even believes that someone like me would support something like that. I mean, it's very stated very clearly in the Constitution, and so one of the things that bothers me, Helen, is some folks pay attention to parts of the Constitution and then they ignore other parts of the Constitution, and so I believe that we should certainly protect everyone's right to bear arms in this country.
Okay, I agree with you there. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
What about, I have this long list of questions.
That's okay.
What are your thoughts on Social Security?
So Social Security, I believe we should expand Social Security. And, that's...
but how do we keep it solvent?
So right now there's a $127,000 cap on salaries. And once a person, an individual, reaches that threshold, they don't pay Social Security anymore. So let's take
So if you make $218,000 a year, you're only paying Social Security on that first $118,000.
That's correct.
And if you make $4 million a year, you're still only paying Social Security on that first $118,000.
That's correct.
Wow.
And so if we were to expand that only up to $250,000, Social Security would be solvent for 52 years, and each current recipient, would receive about $100 more per month.
So you're for raising the cap?
Absolutely.
Just to $250,000?
Let's start at $250,000, Helen. You know how many people make more than $250,000 in the 4th Congressional District?
Very few, I would imagine.
Less than 2%.
Yeah, so this really would not affect anybody here in our
98% of us would benefit from this if we're, fortunate enough to live long enough to receive Social Security, and would be solvent for the next 50 years, which would give the next generation time to work out the future of Social Security. But I very much believe in expansion.
Okay. What do you mean by expanding? Like just paying out higher benefits to the same amount of people, or lowering the age of retirement, or what do you mean by expansion?
No, I would say yes, just more to the current recipients right now. I would like to see it go back to 65 as well. I mean, we continue to see it. That's always the answer is let's raise the age limit, and I think that many of us know people that worked their entire life that weren't fortunate enough to retire and that passed away, and so I'm for bringing it back down to 65 years old. I'm 47. I've been paying it for 30 years, and I'll tell you, Helen, I want my money. I want to live to be 65, and I want to collect my earned benefits, not my entitlement, but my earned benefit.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right. Well, is there anything else you want the voters to know about you? Absolutely. I'm like I said in the beginning, I'm a Tennessee guy, the only one that's born and raised in the state here. I think that's extremely important, and so my heart's in the right place. And we're not doing this for fame or fortune. We're doing this because we believe that the citizens of Tennessee deserve fair representation in Washington. Scott Desjardins has had his chance. He'll have 7 years at the end of this term. I believe in term limits, Helen. I believe that 8 years is long enough for a congressman, quite frankly. And when I'm elected, I would only seek one more term. That way I don't qualify for the congressional $100,000 a year pension that Congressman Desjardins will receive for the rest of his life. I would come back to Tennessee after 2 terms and would automatically disqualify myself for that. I think that's wrong. I don't know anyone else in the country that after 5 years of service they're guaranteed $100,000 a year, and those are just the very simple things like that. Do we have a call? Okay. What do I have to punch?
The line is blinking.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Okay.
I don't know when it happened, but several years ago they passed a bill where if you are retired from the federal government and you work afterwards and earn your Social Security benefits, then they will penalize you 60% of your Social Security. I don't know how many people it affects, but it affects several of us, I'm sure. I'd just like to know if he has an answer or could address that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, and I think that's really unfair, quite frankly. You see that happening to a lot of seniors out there, and it's not just with former federal employees.
Sorry.
It's not just with former federal employees, but you'll see the income cap on seniors that are out there working as well. And so I think that's unfair. I really do. I don't think that, and especially in this area with AEDC and the base here, we have a lot of federal employees in this area. And so I disagree with that, and I would do everything I could to unwind that when I get to Washington. I think that if you have paid in, you deserve that benefit. It is an earned benefit. And so I find those types of programs unfair. Recently, there was a new thing that came out by the state of Tennessee, and a lot of senior recipients, Pastor Andre Chrismon up in Murfreesboro is working on this now. Their checks have been cut off because they didn't fill out an 80-page form in order to continue to receive their benefits. And so, I mean, it's a little ridiculous to ask a 70-year-old to fill out 80 pages of paperwork in order to receive their benefits. So I'm for streamlining this. I think it should be a very simple process, and I certainly don't think our federal employees should be penalized for their service to our country.
Okay. Well, I've agreed with everything you said today, except I disagree with you on one thing, and that's term limits. And my sort of thinking on that is, well, everyone says, oh, they're corrupt, throw them out, blah, blah, blah. Well, when you are operating in a system where you have to raise $40,000 a day, how are you not going to get corrupt? I mean, how are you not going to be beholden to these big, rich, special interests? It's almost impossible. So I don't think the individual people are bad, but the system is bad, and it turns good, well-intentioned people into basically whores for money.
I think a lot of people would agree with you, Helen.
And so if you term limit them out, you're just going to replace them with another corrupt person because the system corrupts them. And so that's why I don't really believe in term limits. And plus, I think, just for me, being in county commission, it took me the first 2 years just to figure
get your feet
out
on the ground.
What's going on. Yeah, and so I think we have a lot of members who've served for years, and they've really learned how government works. And I think it's good to have experienced politicians. But I think if we could get money out of politics, they wouldn't get so corrupt and entrenched and beholden and all that.
I think that's a great point, Helen. A lot of people make that point. What I really am opposed to is that Congress doesn't have to live by the same rules as the rest of us, and so they're never going to vote away their $100,000 a year lifetime salary.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be for a lifetime. But I do realize that if you are running for Congress, you're giving up. A lot of people are giving up their day job. You're having to do your day job and this. Mariah Phillips is a teacher. She has to be at school every day from 7 to 3. And so if you're running, you're going to you need something for when you'll have to quit your job to be a congressman, and so you're going to need a little money for maybe 3 or 4 years to get back on your feet, because then we'll only have really rich people running for Congress if you don't get at least 3 years after you serve of benefits.
There's some truth to that.
Because not many people can afford to leave their job and go out and campaign and possibly lose, and
Well, it's already set up for the wealthy now. Really, you've got to be a millionaire to run for office now.
Call.
Okay, great.
Hello.
I just had a question for Mr. Reynolds. Could he point out what Scott Desjardins has done for our environmental protection and renewable energy, and what are Mr. Reynolds' views on these issues? Thank you.
Great, thank you for that question. So I've seen really nothing that Scott has done for the environmental side of the world. He's obviously opposed a lot of the renewable energies and the subsidies that go along with those renewable energy jobs. Recently, I was in Whitwell, Tennessee, where they have the coal mining museum there. And coal mining was pretty strong here in the 4th Congressional District in several areas. And so I've worked with power companies for the last 30 years, and so what I have seen is not government regulation driving coal out, it's simply market forces and, quite frankly, natural gas. And so when you think about the coal burning process, they mine the coal, they put it on a train, they send it to a power plant, they process it, they burn it, then they have to bury the ash, or they could just go out and tap into a natural gas pipeline. And so market forces are what's really driving down the coal, and it's been in decline for 70 years. However, to think that we can continue to go on without any coal at all is simply impossible and not true. We have to have a mixed form of renewable energies, but I certainly support solar and wind and hydro. We have a lot of hydro here in Tennessee, and those are clean forms of energy. I think we should continue to promote those all over the world and all over our country. The rest of the world is beating us now in renewable energy. China, and China has more coal-burning plants than anywhere else in the world, and I forget something like 30 a month come online there, and they're reducing that now because they're understanding that renewable energy is the way to go. And so certainly no one wants clean or dirty air or dirty water. I don't think that Republicans want that. I don't think that it's a nonpartisan issue. it's how we go about transitioning these folks, especially in the coal industry. I refuse to declare a war on coal. These coal miners are my friends and my neighbors, and so we should go in with we should be able to retrain our coal miners into renewable energy jobs, or be able to bring manufacturing jobs into these areas that were once supported by the coal mining industry. And as time goes on, we're going to continue to see it go down, whether it's market forces or whether it's environment climate agreements that are out there. But I definitely think that we're moving in the right direction incrementally, and we have to continue to do so. So I don't think that we're going to step back and, really the cars are really one of the main polluters as well, and they're making great strides in that as far as the energy goes with the cars as well, so and getting away from oil. So eventually, long term, we will transition away from these fossil fuels. But we can't, once again, kind of like healthcare, we can't disrupt the market too much. If folks go back to paying $4 a gallon for gas, we're going to see ourselves spiral right back into another recession. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And so we're fortunate that we have cheap energy, but we need to be mindful of the future and of our children, and move to the clean side as much as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, if you don't have anything else to say,
thanks, Helen. I really appreciate
we're
that.
Out of time.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity this morning to be in Franklin County. We'll be coming back in October for your fundraiser.
I think we have one more call.
Okay, great.
We'll find out.
All right. Is she going to answer it?
Yeah.
Karen will?
But they're gone.
Oh, okay.
Now, we'll be back in October for your fundraiser here, and we'll be throwing some of our own events here.
Yeah, we're going to be having a big barbecue thing in October. I don't know the exact date in October, but we'll be announcing it sooner. But yeah, we would love to see you there then. And all right, well, thank you so
Helen.
much.
I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you coming. Thank you, Al.
You're welcome.
All right.